Welcome to the Hangout. It's really good to have you with us again today. Thanks for coming. I'm at somewhere called Beacon House today, which is a really great place to be. Dan, I think you know Beacon House, don't you?
Yeah, in Colchester. Yeah, love Beacon House. Yeah.
And today we have with us the manager of Beacon House,
Hey,
Vivienne.
Viv.
How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, so tell us first of all where Beacon House is in Colchester, if we wanted to find it.
Okay, we're on East Hill, and I always say go to the War Memorial from the High Street and then keep going. And then we're opposite a massive church, which is St James's Church. But realistically, what I really like about it, from my office window, I can see the Roman wall, and you know in Colchester you still see bits of it around the wall, which means that on this location for 2,000 years, we've been a place that welcomes strangers and gives the first place to get a cup of tea when you come in wherever you're travelling from. So it's that sort of 2,000 years of spirituality and hospitality that we try and maintain at Beacon House, yeah. So that's, follow the Roman road and you'll find the Roman wall and you'll find us.
That's a great way of giving directions on how to find Beacon House.
Yes.
So tell us what is Beacon House? What do you do there? What's your what's your day-to-day look like?
Okay, we start at 9:30 and the briefers will get together and talk through the day and pray, and we're mainly Christians who work here, and we're here to help people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So they're going to come in dirty, they're going to come in cold, they're going to come in hungry, and we'll deal with all of those basic needs as soon as they come in at 10 o'clock. Then from that point, we then take them to whatever they might need in terms of looking for housing, looking for jobs. We've got a fantastic cafe upstairs, which is called Cafe Plus, which just means it's food plus all the extras. We've got a bank of computers that can go online. We've got an art room, they can do some art therapy. We've got a garden, they can go out there and chill out in the garden. And we also have a range of different agencies coming in to help them with whatever their needs might be. This morning, we've had Andy Neal in here from Christians Against Poverty talking about debt management. And also this morning we've had a programme called the Bounty Programme, which is talking about health and well-being. So we just let anyone into the doors really and deal with whatever they need.
So how many people would you see in the space of a week? How many different people would you meet with?
In the space of a week, we probably see about 100 different people. So there'll be some people that come in every single day for a shower and a cup of tea and breakfast and what have you. And there'll be others that we just see once a week. And possibly when they've run out of money, when they need some food. And there'll be others who just drop in occasionally. I think the hardest part about this job is you never know why you don't see someone for a couple of days. It could be good news that they've connected back up with their family or got housed, and sometimes it can be very bad news. And that's one of the tensions we live in here, that you're dealing with probably the most vulnerable people in the town, and you're never quite sure what happens from outside their front doors.
With something like that, I can imagine there's quite a lot of personal attachment to the people that you might see quite regularly, and obviously from the Christian point of view, loving people, wanting to help people. But with that amount of people coming through, how do you manage to not get like too personally, emotionally attached to everyone that you meet in the time that you're there? Because if you did that, or do you do that? I don't know. I mean, that must get quite draining.
Yeah, we do constantly talk about boundaries, because we do have to love and give of ourselves, but in a way that we know that we're not going to put ourselves at risk. And we do get to know these people very well. And one of the volunteers recently said that she was out in town and met someone, and he introduced her to his friends as his grandma. And so people see us as family. We had a letter from a guy who's currently in HMP Chelmsford. And he wrote to us, this is one weekly letter a week he sends to Beacon House because we're his family. So there's a whole load of connections going on. But the way that we stop ourselves getting too emotionally drained is because we generally believe this is God's work that we're doing. So we do our little bit, and then God does his massive bit. So at the end of the day, you get really distressed, and there are stories that you know that someone's going out the door when we close at the end of the day. And they're going through a very bad situation, and there's nothing you can do about it. And to stop ourselves getting emotionally torn apart, we just trust to God. So that prayer meeting we have at 9:30 in the morning, we're constantly praying for the situations that we know about, and just say, God, do the miracle. And we do see quite a few miracles here, which is good.
Yeah.
So is Beacon House specifically a Christian venture?
Yes, the ethos of it is Christian. We're actually funded by the clinical commissioning group to provide a clinic, because something that people don't realise is that when you're homeless, you can't register with a doctor. The first thing you're asked is, what's your address? And if you have no address, you can't access any medical services. There's a statistic, which you have to treat these things with respect or not respect, but it says that homeless people generally die around 42 years old, and they're dying from basic illnesses that we would recover from because they just haven't got access to the health service. So on our ground floor, we have a complete kitchen out clinic, and if you saw it, you'd be almost quite envious of it because it's very well equipped, very well staffed, and it's on a drop-in basis, and that's what we provide for homeless people. And in there, we're looking after their sexual health, we're looking after blood-borne viruses, we're looking after needle exchange for those who are taking drugs, that there's a safe environment for them to get clean equipment, and just generally keeping people well. So while we're a Christian basis, we are about keeping people healthy and safe.
Yeah. So we'll talk a bit more about Beacon House in a moment. Tell us quickly, what's life for you outside of Beacon House? Family, church, all that stuff. What else goes on in the life of Viv?
Yeah, so what I say at 3 o'clock when I wander out, so that's one job finished, and now on to the next one. So at the moment it's calm in the Wiggins household because we just finished A-levels. Patrick's just finished sitting all the exams, and I'm very pleased because he finished studies on Friday and started a full-time job on Saturday. And you think if you can get your kids getting the work ethic, then that's half the battle really.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could give your dad some tips on that, Dan. But,
don't worry, Dan. I don't think she's trying to get you a job just yet.
No, not yet. And Jenny and Holly have finished all their GCSEs, and so they're looking forward to doing their work experience. So next week, Holly's doing hers at the first site, the Golden Banana just up the road. Yeah. And then Jenny will be doing hers later. So we're at that stage where they're all becoming adults. But you still have to sort of keep an eye on them. So it's an interesting stage.
Brilliant.
Independence versus dependence.
What about church life? What's your role within Kingsland? How long have you been going there? Yeah.
Okay, well we've been going to Kingsland Church for 3 buildings worth, is what I can say. Is that we originally started going in the old building, the wooden building, and then we moved on to the glass.
Around about the time that the Roman wall was put up, I guess, with the.
Not quite, it's outside the Roman wall, isn't it? But we've been going probably about 13 years. We have a little break in the middle. So our roles at the church are just, I don't know, people who do stuff. So you often find me on the door welcoming people in because I love doing that job. And I'm
very good at that. Always feel welcome when Viv's on the door.
Good, and hopefully we'll have some sort of human contact, whether it's a hug, a high five, or a handshake, and I judge that very carefully on how old you are. So if you get a hug, you're old, and if you get a high five, you're still hanging with the youngsters. So that's my rule. But yeah, so we used to do much more than we do, but I don't think you can sort of carry too many ministries in the town. So at the moment, Kevin and I just get on with welcoming people. And Kevin he does a wonderful job in the sound desk, and I think at the moment he's one of a very few number of people who can actually work the new desk, so we get called out all sorts of time of day to go and sort that out. So in general, we go to Kingsland because it's a place where we can really feel God, and sometimes you go to other churches and you think about the job you're doing or your role, but the essential thing for me is I know that I can always hear God during worship and during the services, and there are times when I sometimes think that Neil has written his whole sermon just with me in mind, because it feels so poignant and applicable to my life. And I just like the way that, again, a bit like Beacon House, you open the doors to anybody, and there's a sense of acceptance and care. And from that place of feeling accepted, you then move forward to making changes.
Yeah. What was the thing that brought you to faith in the first place? Have you always been a Christian? Did you grow up as a Christian? What changed or didn't change?
I went to church as a youngster, and in my teenage years I was quite actively involved. But then I went to university, and suddenly I realised that all of that was wrong, and that this was real life, freedom from home. And probably from the age of 19, the next couple of decades, I did things my own way, and I had all the wrong attitudes to life, towards money, relationships. The whole lot was completely out of sync. And it's only when I have children in my late 30s that I suddenly thought, I can't bring my children up living this way of life because it's not the best way to live. So I had my son Patrick, and then I had the twins. And I kept feeling that I needed to go back to church because I wasn't teaching my children the right way to live. I was running a full-time job at that time, so 3 children and a full-time job. And I had to get back to work after maternity leave. And I found a church in Croydon that I knew did a mother and toddler group. So I remember going to this mother and toddler group to find a childminder to go back to work. And I hung on the door of this church toddler group, and it was closed, it's half term. And I just said, oh, for God's sake, help me. And I was quite desperate because I'd been told that there were no nursery places in Croydon for twins because it was just too much of an ask. But by the time I got back I brought the twins back home, and there was an answer machine message saying, actually, you wouldn't believe it, but two places had come up for the nursery, and I believe that cry of help, for God's sake, help me, like on that church door, was my first turning point. The point when, in front of the son, when you come to yourself, you suddenly realise I cannot carry all of this on my own. So I was running a full-time job. I had my 3 children, and my partner at the time was going through his own issues. And so it was at that point I started going to church. I remember, because I stood up in the right time and sat down in the right places, when there was an altar call one time, this man next to me said, oh, you don't need this, do you, because you know what you're doing. And I said, no, I really want to ask God into my life, and I just want to hand over everything to him. And from that point, it seems as if everything started being taken away from me. So the big house in London, the big job in London, the relationship, all sort of crumbled away. And I moved up to Colchester to be with my sister, who was a very, very ready and willing babysitter for a start. And then bit by bit, God has given me all those things back. I've remarried, I've got a reasonable place to live, I've got this job, which I think is the job I am designed to do. And that they've all come back. All the things that I lost in the 20 years of doing it my way have been replaced in God's way and God's standard. And so you never give anything up for God, but he doesn't give you back 10 times better than you could ever imagine for yourself.
Amazing.
Good.
Cool. So back to Beacon House then. What is your actual role? You're site manager? Like what is your official job title?
I'm the centre manager, and I reckon that I've got a job which is empowering projects to happen. So I just need to make sure I grease the wheels to make things happen, which means I do an awful lot of my time outside the building as well as inside. So I'm talking to different people who've got money, the health service, the local authorities, Job Centre Plus, all the things that our clients need. I'm out there sort of making things happen. And also my job is to empower the team, staff and volunteers. We've got 10 paid staff and 45 volunteers, and they all need loving and encouraging, and that's what I do.
Okay, yeah. I was just going to ask how many members of staff are there? Are they like you mentioned they're 10 paid, and then you have volunteers as well? Did you say?
Yeah, 45 volunteers. Yeah.
Wow.
What do those volunteers do?
A range of things. We've got a nice volunteer in the background who's typing away obediently. That's it. Excellent. And she's applying for funding for us. But we have volunteers handing out clothes. We have volunteers helping with chiropody. We have volunteers who cook. We have volunteers who do the garden. We have volunteers who do music therapy sessions. So if you have talent and you think you can help somebody out, then I'm really happy to speak to anyone who wants to volunteer here.
And also, you just mentioned clothes as well. I guess people they give you old clothes. Like how does that work? Do you just take anything and then needle it out, or how does, if someone wanted to give to Beacon House, how would they go about doing that?
Well, as you know, Dan, we've been recipients of your own stylish clothing.
That's right. Yeah, I was just going to say. Yeah.
So in actual fact, your age group, because I'd rather have sort of younger people's clothes than older people's clothes, because most people we see are young. But any donations you want to bring in, any time between 10 and 2, we're open. And just come round to our entrance in Roman Road and knock on the door. What we need is good quality clothes, because people think, I always give a talk, I say, have you seen a homeless person? And they think they have, because they've seen someone sitting in a doorway looking scruffy and dirty. But the reality is that that's not particularly homelessness, that's another issue. Because the homeless people in Colchester, I like to think you'd never spot them as homeless, because they look clean, they look well dressed, and they look healthy. And that's part of the work we do here. We give them showers, we ask for donations of toiletries. So when you give your bubble bath or your shower gel to Beacon House, you're making the whole town smell sweeter. That's what I always tell people. So we're very lucky to get donations of food. We get bread from Greg's, and we get some chicken from a local restaurant, and we get food from Sainsbury's as well. So we run on donations. I reckon that we double our turnover in terms of donated time and goods that we get here. But we always need toothpaste, and we always need razor blades, disposable razor blades.
So if you're listening to this and you've got toothpaste or razor blades lying around not needed, get them to you.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome.
And Viv, just kind of going back to your faith side of it, how important is your faith in doing this job?
Okay. One of the things I generally believe and live my whole life by is that God provides everything we need. And for a long time I lived on that in my own relationship with my family. And I used to walk ankle deep in God's blessing, because there were always good things happening coming to my life. But since I've worked at Beacon House, I now think we're walking chest deep in abundance. And it's the fact that we trust God for any resources that we have. We also trust God around timing. And something you mentioned earlier, Dan, about letting people go out the door and never being sure what's going to happen to them, is that we trust that if we do our bit, then God will do his bit. So we always trust the timing. If someone's come in and that's the right time for that conversation, so you're not always worrying about, oh, I should have said that, I should have done that. We generally believe that we're doing the right, best thing we can do at the time. And it's that reliance on the Holy Spirit to know when to push something or when to just be quiet. And so we try and really be led by the Holy Spirit here. And I'm quite impressed by the fact that often people come into the building and feel physically impacted by the sense of peace and the sense of acceptance that we have here. So although we've broadened our remit, now you don't necessarily have to be a signed up churchgoer to be a volunteer here, but you do have to want to love and care for people. So we're actually opening up a lot wider in terms of how I think God would how Jesus would reach everyone who wants to come in, not just those who have the right labels in.
Amazing.
Vivienne, thank you very much for joining us today. It's just brilliant. I just love what you're doing. How long have you done this for? Just a couple of quick questions before we finish.
Okay. I've been manager here since September, which is 9 months. So that was my 9 months pregnancy period. So now things are really going to happen, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think the key for me is going to be, I'm going to be really, really conscious now of whether I get a high five or a hug when I arrive on a Sunday morning.
The welcome is code.
What are you currently on? Are you on hug or high five?
I don't know. I'm normally in the building before Viv is, though, so I generally miss out on all the welcomes unless I'm not in the band, but that's quite rare.
You'll have to go out the doors and come in again.
Yeah, I think I'm going to, just to try and work out where I'm at, yeah.
Okay, so the challenge for everyone is check out how old you are by whether you're going to get yourself a high five or a hug on a Sunday morning. And when you've got over that bit and you've realised how old you are, if you're getting the high five, you have to donate clothing.
Yeah.
If you're getting the hug, I'd suggest some toothpaste.
Yeah.
And disposable razors. And if you're in between and didn't get either of those, then you should be volunteering down here. That seems to be the summary.
That covers everyone. Yeah.
That covers everyone. Vivienne, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure, and just being part of Beacon House here today. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.